Thank you, Carolyn. We're going to move on to Dr. Eric Paraxlis, who is the Chief Information Officer and Chief Scientist of Informatics at the FDA. And before the FDA, Dr. Paraxlis was Senior VP of R&D Information Technology at J&J, where he spearheaded the use of Transmart at J&J and beyond.
You know you're being quietly effective in your new job when you get invited to do a talk from what you did 4 years ago at your old job. So I'll just take that as a compliment. Actually, I do want to thank J&J. This is a case study of something that we did back in, I guess it was 2008, 2009. And it really is a talk about sociology a little bit more than anything else. Simply put, I had been asked at one point at J&J to bring together informatics and data across their immunology, oncology, and biotechnology franchises. And these, of course, had been separate companies at one point that had lots of products, lots of different standards, lots of clinical trials. And so when they were talking to me, I said, that's fine, it's real simple. I have to have all the data. If you give me all the data, I'll make something work for you. And, it was very, even a company like J&J, and we were on the biotech side, a lot of the research folks didn't have access to the clinical data, the preclinical data. There's a silo next to you, whether you see it or not. It's probably there. And so we very quickly decided to not reinvent anything. And so I looked around and I came across I2B2, a fantastic bit of infrastructure funded through the CTSAs at NIH. Zach Kohani and the folks up at Harvard had built it. And it was really an amazing data warehousing tool that had been used for EMR data and clinical data. So I used it. We decided to use it. We decided to go completely open source with this system. And we decided to put it on Amazon's public cloud, EC2. Which was pretty heretical for 2007 and 2008, but quite frankly, it was 1/15 the cost of doing it inside, and we studied the security, did the assessments, and it was just as good as ours. It was fine. So we decided to do this, and it was starting to work well. We got a lot of trials in there, and the comment about standards I'll make is, just use what you got and go. Patients are waiting, right? So, what we would do is, of course, we wanted to do this thing with a lot of oncology. So we looked at CDISC, and everything that worked, we use. And we look at other things. Everything that works, you use. And then at some point, you do some dictionaries, and then you have really smart humans, curators and folks that help you align the data and get it in. I mean, I think if you've got a project to do, just do it and get it done. Now, we weren't doing, to be really clear about this was really a data warehouse for hypothesis generation, biomarker research. Okay, we still don't have a disease-modifying treatment for asthma, but we've run all these asthma trials. What might we know? How might we learn something? So to the point that both Vicki and Carol made, it's a very different thing if you try to automate pre-market submission review. Yes, that's a factory. You want widgets, Henry Ford, get it done, make it concise, push it through, make the process work, make it effective, take time out. But this was more about R&D. This was more about, people talk about signal detection. I think I'm more of a fan of saying signal management because detection is just pore size. Management is deciding which ones to act on and what to do. You can always get out the money and run the experiment with the p-value with all the zeros when the time comes. I think it's much more interesting to understand how to quickly understand and rule out hypotheses. So we had some initial success with this, and this was when the Innovative Medicines Initiative in the EU was really getting going. And some of you probably have heard of IMI in the EU. It's quite a large consortium, multi-billion euros, half put in from the European pharmaceutical manufacturers, half put in from the European Commission. And the very first project they stood up was something called UBioPred, and it was a project to look at severe asthma in 5,000 patients, most of which were severe enough where they were going to get bronchial tissue. So in the planning meetings for this, I got sent over I was at Centocor R&D at the time, and I got asked to go over and meet. And it was really fantastic because there was like 9 pharmas in the room. There were like 30 academics all designing a clinical trial. And it sounds like chaos, but I got to tell you, it was as much fun as pizza at graduate school because it was a lot of ideation, and the academics were doing things like nosomics and all these brilliant ideas about the types of analytics you could do. And of course, us on the farm, we knew how to run a trial. We knew what consent had to look like. You knew what operations and supplies had to look like. And so we started looking at this, and they hadn't really thought about the data, which is what you get when you run a 5,000 patient trial. So, we started talking about that, and we started getting to that, and people were very, very open to this. And this went on at Imperial College. And then, then it was like, okay, this company's doing this and this company's doing that, and their system, and it's like, guys, let's just talking about bringing it together and how you actually make it work. So what we did, and this was, we actually set this up in the first week, and we decided to do a little pilot. And I really want to take I don't know if any of my colleagues from GSK are in the room, but the GSK folks had run one of the largest COPD studies ever called Eclipse. And they had it for years, didn't meet its endpoints, but it was probably one of the richest things. And they said, we've got this Eclipse data. We've never really been able to look at it the way we want to without biostatisticians taking a lot of time. They said, what do you think? So I said, well, let's take a look at it at the system. So what we literally did in 90 days, Yi-K Go, the head of bioinformatics at Imperial College, stood up a version of Transmart on his cloud. We moved a large cohort of the GSK Eclipse data in. AZ put some data in, and J&J put some data in. And 3 months later, they were all looking at it and doing it. No one could believe it had happened so early. We went over to Brussels to the EU and showed them, quite frankly, how simple it was. Now, again, no p-values with lots of zeros behind it. But what happened more than anything else was the incentives aligned. Right? We all had one goal, aligned, and now actually the system ended up being its own call. Now the eTrix is actually the knowledge management layer across IMI, and that's kind of where that went. So, I just was asked to kind of give a quick case study of what it can look like. And I think, just to touch on some of the points of the session here, I think, the data is going to take you so far. It really is an experiment. You're doing in silico science a lot of the time. So think about accuracy and precision relative to the experiment you're trying to run. Just because it's in a computer versus a beaker, it doesn't have to get harder. You'd hope it would get more simple. And if you're looking for signal detection, one of the things, of course, you try to do on the pharma side is you want to fail fast. You don't want to waste patient time or money on drugs that aren't going to work. You want to rule things out. So get me 60 or 70 hypotheses that I can rule out. And then I could be really interested in the one that I can't, because I can't disprove it, right? And going forward. So, a couple things of this. One is, I think that you can use standards to the points of the need you actually have at hand. Two, I'm a big proponent of open source software and technology. I really do believe that we don't have to spend the millions and millions of dollars that often go on to do some of these things. I often get asked, we sitting in a meeting and someone said, well, I'm so-and-so from this patient advocacy organization, and someone just told me, I have 30,000 patients willing to give their records, and I was told it was $150 million to do it. And I'm like, you're off by about a factor of 100, to do that. It really is, just to get something like that done. So that's the quick Transmart story. I want to thank the folks at J&J, Paul Stoffel, Sue Dillon, Bill Hite, and Jay Siegel, who were heretical enough to let me do something like that, because back then it was unheard of, and I think they do it again. Thank you.